Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Christy and I am here with part 2 of reacting to Nia's book, Bottom of the Pyramid. I'm really sad I don't have my physical copy of the book here with me in Pittsburgh. I actually forgot it on my nightstand in New Orleans and I finished the book on my Kindle. So all of my notes are on my phone. They're not, I don't have the very cute book to hold up, but this is part 2 of I'm reading the second half and reacting to the second half of Nia's book. However, before I can talk about the book, I have to stop for a moment and give Nia all of the congratulations in the world because she made the New York Times bestsellers list. So exciting, such an accomplishment, and I am beyond proud of her. If you haven't read the book, make sure that you do and send Nia some love because that is an amazing feat for anyone, and I am super duper duper proud of her. You guys love part 1 of this video. If you missed it, please make sure that you go back and watch it. I hate that I don't have the book in my hand, so I can't just flip to my marked pages. Hopefully, I will be able to be as profoundly insightful as I was in part 1 where I actually held the book. Picking up on the second half of the book, I have to say, I understand this is not a funny moment. I know that. However, I'm going to tell a story that makes it funny. She is talking about specifically being the only Black dancer on the team. That is hard to read because there are things that she brings up that I was not aware of. It makes me feel really sad for Nia, and honestly, any Black person, but any person of color who may or may not have had the same experiences. She talks specifically about she couldn't do some of the same things that the girls did because she might be looked at as aggressive, or it might not be as tolerated for her, which I would have never known in a million years. And that's something I think really impactful that I think a lot of us need to stop and take note of, because that's kind of crazy. It's not kind of crazy. It's actually very crazy to think something as innocent as being a little kid and having fun could be misconstrued in a different way simply because of the color of your skin. I was on my heels about that. However, Nia did say something in this chapter that made me laugh, only because it is a scene of Dance Moms that is so ridiculous. Now, the sentiment is sad. However, the scene is funny. She said, Abby claimed my mom didn't love me because she worked. And then she goes on to say, pretended my parents couldn't afford to pay her, which was untrue. I'm not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. We all know that Frasers were very capable of paying dance bills. But the fact that she claimed her mom didn't love her because she worked, it's terrible. It is terrible because Nia stood there. Abby was like, your mom's not here. Does she even love you? Insane. Holly was working. However, there is a scene later in that episode where Kelly is bringing props into the dance studio and Abby is yelling at her for being too involved. And Kelly literally yells at her and says, well, what do you want? She's like, I'm here doing my job. I brought my props in, and she goes, you just told Nia that her mother didn't love her because she's at work. And it is wrong on every level. However, the reason it is so funny is because it is actually something that was said and just dismissed. You just told the kid her mother didn't love her because she was at work. Insanity. So you have to laugh at that because it's just thrown around like it's just something normal, and it's so far from normal. Then we go on to the part where she meets Shangela. She's talking about the girls all realizing that Shangela is a boy. And they said, did you know Shangela is a boy? And Nia said, I honestly couldn't believe it because Shangela was definitely a woman in our eyes. And then our parents had to explain what a drag queen was, and we all thought it was pretty cool. I have heard from multiple people throughout the last 10, 12 years, or 12, I don't even know how long the show premiered. Dance Moms was the first time that people were ever exposed to drag queens. Kelly's gay talk, I know, is iconic among the LGBTQ community. Even though we were small town moms from Pittsburgh with our girls, we didn't always get it right. We always embraced the drag community and the queens we met. I don't know if it was the pageantry and the performance and the glam and the makeup, but it was never something that we were like, oh, this is weird. Yes, we had conversations because Shangela, I think, was the first time any of us saw a drag queen in person, and Kelly's like, well, where do you put the wiener? Whatever. But it was just something that was cool and a neat experience and fun for our girls. And I love that we were able to kind of introduce kids maybe in other parts of the country who wouldn't have had that exposure. and show them that it was totally a cool, fine, fun thing. And people have come up to us and said like that really was impactful to them at some point in their life. So I do love that, and I love that she specifically talked about that. Then Nia goes on to talk about, obviously a lot of Nia's dances were very tied to race, which I shake my head at, because I'll specifically speak for me. I hoped was a sympathetic ear for Holly because I understood what was going on. But I will say one of my favorite dances from the show was, they ended up calling it At Last, and Nia said it was Free at Last, where she was meant to play the role of an enslaved person. We filmed the entire episode, and they went back and they were worried that the dance would be perceived as too controversial, so they changed the entire episode and everything was pickups. However, I will say that dance, I thought, was profoundly important and impactful. I've talked about this dance in other YouTube videos. I thought that she was so exceptional in that role because of her strength, but also her vulnerability. I thought she was so spectacular in that piece. I don't recall if she said it was a negative or a positive experience for her. I just hope she knows that, to me, I think that that piece touched people and was very profound. And I hope she knows that, because it was. Nobody else could have played that part, for obvious reasons. But I don't think anybody else would have brought the level of vulnerability to that part, regardless of race. I thought Nia was amazing in it. So Nia, I love that number, and I hope you know how beautiful you were in telling that story, because you were spectacular. She goes on to say some things about Abby. If Abby wanted a dance to win, she'd set it up for a win. I say it every week on Back to the Bar. She knew exactly what she was doing with the choreography she gave people and what she wanted and who she wanted to win and when. Then she goes on, and there's a paragraph I want to read out loud, because I know this very much. But when you read it out loud coming from a different perspective that is not your own daughter, I think when you put it across the board and you think about these 7 girls and how they grew up, I think it's really important to remember. She said, living under a microscope and having so many people judge me, my actions, and my identity through many of my formative years was brutal. I was not a character on a show. I was a young girl growing up. It was exhausting trying to do everything right. I constantly feared that I would do or say something to make me look bad, so I started to overthink everything I said or did. No decision was too small. I know that Chloe struggled with that as well. It's impactful to read those words on paper coming from Nia, because it's true. They did grow up under a microscope and everything was magnified, and I'm sure it was exhausting. I can't even imagine how exhausting it was. I'll hear little snide comments sometimes like, oh, it must be nice none of those girls have real jobs. Well, they do. They have amazingly real jobs because they work with brands, they're ambassadors, they're influencers, they're social media content creators, they're telling their stories, they go to college, they're writers, they're actresses, they're singers. They have real jobs. However, do they go to an office 9 to 5? No, but their jobs are relentless because social media will take just that one thing, never stops. If you're on set, you don't have any control over your time, your hours. However, I will say that reading that paragraph and knowing that what they gave up as children has been able to be repaid to them as adults, that they have these flexible lives and these interesting experiences. To me, they earned that. They deserve it. They earned it, because they certainly didn't make money to sustain them for the rest of their lives on that show. I think that what they gave up for everyone's entertainment, and look, everybody's going to attack me for saying it. You put them on the show. This is an argument that can go on and on and on. Yes, it happened. Okay, it did. Can't change the past. I will say, to me, I think they all deserve any success they have now because of what they gave up as children for the entertainment of the world. I do. I really mean that. And I hope every single one of them gets to live out their lives in the most autonomous way possible, where they get to make their choices because they were given an amazing opportunity. Not just when they were 9, that they were able to grow and sustain into their adult lives. Then she goes on to talk about a time when her and Asia had a duet and they weren't given a chance chance to warm up properly, and not all routines that were competed were televised, which is very true. Ask Brooke. Brooke did solos all the time that weren't televised, and they could have gotten hurt because they didn't have a chance to warm up properly. That was always something that we fought tooth and nail for, was to give the kids enough time to warm up and to get ready and to be like, have a few minutes of like, let me catch our breath before we go on stage. I get that the producers were always like, oh, you know, we can get them on stage and they're flustered, it's a better storyline. Well, that's not very fair, because these kids have worked their asses off. At least give them a chance to perform well. I remember that day, and I remember they were not given a chance to warm up, and I thought that that was really unfair advantage. And it was obvious that that routine was looked at as a filler routine, which is a shame, because both of those girls were really good like acrobats and performers. So I think they deserved like a little bit more attention there. Later on, Nia tells a story about a fan who, this breaks my heart, about a fan who gave everyone a snow globe except for her. I mean, that makes me like literally sick to my stomach to think about, like, her standing there and not receiving something. Like, I don't even know how that person, and it was probably a child who gave it to her, but how did that mom allow that child to give those gifts to every child except for Nia? I'd like to have a word with that mom, because that is really, really, really not kind behavior. And what did you just teach your child? Ugh. I love the stories that she tells about going to events with her brothers. Look, I am team EJ and Will all day, every day. Sometimes the kids, and I mean like our other children, would be sitting on the opposite side of us while we were filming. Like if they had to come to the studio and like a dad was picking them up. It didn't happen often, but sometimes. And I can remember times when EJ would be sitting there and I would say something and he would giggle. Like he would be giggling. And Holly was like, ugh, I always loved joking around with EJ because he was fun to joke around with. And I think, and I might be speaking out of turn, but I think EJ liked me because I was kind of like bad. So we would crack up and I would hear him giggling on the other side. And it would make me like totally leave the scene because I would laugh at him laughing. And I didn't want to laugh because then they would ask him to leave. And I didn't want him to have to go downstairs. But I wonder if he remembers that. So I was really excited that they got to experience like going to, I think it was iHeartRadio Awards, I don't remember. But that was really a fun read as well. Then she goes on about the Joffrey Ballet School auditions. This is the thing that infuriates me, and I just put this in my another video I filmed. People forget there are producers behind the scenes. Like, do people really believe that Nia would walk into a ballet audition and do a death drop? No, that was choreographed for her by Abby. And I'm going to go one step further and say, I wonder if a producer told Abby to put the death drop in Nia's thing because it was like her signature move. I don't know if she did, but I'm always telling you guys like, oh, producers made me say this or they say this. Maybe they made her do that, but it makes me sad that people are like, they did rip her apart online for doing the death drop. Nia's not doing the death drop at a ballet audition, you know? Like, that was clearly a show-driven thing. I loved when she talked about their 17 magazine photo shoot. I hate that it was terrible for her behind the scenes, but I remember seeing that spread of the three of them and just thinking like how beautiful it was and how that show had kept giving these girls from Pittsburgh like these unbelievable opportunities, because 12-year-old Christi would have sold my soul to be in 17 magazine, and here were little girls that were like my daughter's friends in 17. I love that for them. Oh! Something else she brought up. She said she has heard that people have written dissertations about dance moms. I'm shocked. Actually, I'm shocked, but not shocked, but totally shocked. I also want to know if anybody has done like psych class eval, like that dissertation about dance moms, because I'd be curious to read that. If you did one, please send me the PowerPoint. I would absolutely love to read it. I'm just saying. Then she talks about something that really, I think, is one of my biggest arguments that I had on the show. When you are on a reality show, the editors are all on one floor and they sit in these editing booths and like they edit the show. And on the wall, they have literally like a sign that says like your name and your archetype, like who you are, who is your character on the show. Yes, we are real people, but they're still telling a story. It's Christi, jealous. This one, you know, dingbat. So anything they can do to perpetuate those storylines, they are going to plug those in. And so they are like training you to believe what you are watching because they are driving that narrative. However, we also had another person driving home how everyone was perceived on the show, and that was Abby with the girls. She had a real say on how America perceived them. Nia talks about this, and I was so glad she did, because I feel like every time I talk about it, especially on the podcast, people are always like, oh my God, Christy's just da-da-da-da-da-da. She's still jealous. I'm like, no, I am not jealous. I am annoyed that we have to keep perpetuating the same narrative when it was Abby's narrative. It wasn't necessarily the truth all the time. Here's the paragraph. She goes, some people held Abby's words in such high regard that they could not fix their eyes to see me for what I was capable of. I knew I didn't just have great solos that showed off my abilities, but I did the group dances every single week and kept up just fine. That right there is something Kelly and I say on Back to the Bar every week. It is so true. Nia, Brooke, Paige, whoever else, Mackenzie, like whoever else Abby was saying like they couldn't keep up, they did the group dances every week. They did them, so they were obviously good. And if you watch the group dances, especially when she puts people in the back, I can use Chloe for an example because she's my daughter, so I know that she did this to her. She put Chloe in the back for everything. She did not want anybody to see Chloe dancing. However, if there was a week that she really wanted to win, or if there was a turn section, she brought her up from the back and put her in the front and then put her back in the back. She was perpetuating these narratives of how people saw everyone. And then Nia goes on, still, some fans would repeat what they heard Abby say. When I see comments under clips of Maddie dancing that say things like, my eyes are trained to watch Maddie, all I could think was, yes, they were literally trained to watch her. Abby had trained viewers to think highly of Maddie and look only at her. That is so true, and that was always what I was arguing. Give them all a fair playing field. And then she said she had so much influence over the way viewers perceived us. If Maddie made a mistake, the sentiment was, everyone makes mistakes. Maddie never makes mistakes, so it's okay. I, on the other hand, wasn't given the same grace because viewers were trained to focus on my alleged shortcomings. I think that could be said for the majority of the girls. I hope that you guys listen to Nia's words, because she's saying the same thing that a lot of us have said for a long time, and I know that hurts Nia. So you were a great dancer. You did not deserve to be treated as if you were subpar. You would have never been on the team or never been on the show if you couldn't keep up. And then she talks about the time when Maddie and Bryn had to pick their own trio, and there were 7 girls. So one person was left out, and she was at the end, and she was the one not chosen. Oh, I was sick to my stomach for her. I can't imagine how hurtful that was. Why they allowed that to go on and like let one child be humiliated on TV is gross. Then later on, Nia says, dancing felt like a job I no longer wanted. Performances that previously thrilled me had become a giant ball of stress. This is one of those things that breaks my heart, because I think all of the girls loved to dance, and it was really hard to hear that Nia, who I know was a consummate performer and loved to dance, had that same feeling. Let's change the atmosphere a little bit, because I feel like the second half of the book was definitely a lot darker than the first half, but I have to point out something really funny in the second half, because if you were a cast member on the show, you know why this is hysterical. Nia talks about a time that her family had went on a Disney cruise, and she said mom had planned this trip twice, but had to cancel both times because of the dance mom schedule. I actually think that Holly may have had to cancel that trip more than twice. I swear to God. It became an ongoing joke, because she would like, okay, I'm going to schedule my Disney cruise. I'm going to go. Everybody speak up now if you don't want me to schedule it. And production would be like, no, go ahead. And then lo and behold, Holly had to change the Disney cruise. It became like this ongoing thing that poor Holly was never going to make the Disney cruise. I am so glad that she has made several Disney cruises now, because I know for years she was trying to get on that damn boat. So moving on, she talks about the end of the show, going back, Lorianne Gibson. I like those stories. I didn't work with Lorianne, but I loved listening to Nia talk about it. A lot of this is hard to read, and I don't want to keep commenting on it, because to me, I'm like, oh, I'll talk about, Chloe's experience. This is not about Chloe's experience. It's about about Nia's, but I feel like when I'm trying to validate Nia, I'm saying I know this to be true because Chloe also went through it. And so I'm not trying to invalidate Nia. I'm trying to say give corroborating evidence and support. She does talk about the time, the final episode, when it was time to leave. They all hugged and turned off the makeup lights and went home. And it still chokes me up because I can see it so specifically in my brain watching them in that room do that. I don't like that Chloe and I went back for season 7 of Dance Moms. I just don't. It was not a warm and fuzzy feeling. I wish we had stayed off for my own reasons, but Chloe felt like she wanted to go back and close it out. However, I will say having that moment, especially with Nia, was really impactful, and I'm glad that Chloe had that closure. I hope in some ways Nia is glad that Chloe was there because they had been friends since they were such little girls. Then she goes on and she talks about her YouTube channel and becoming an influencer, and I love that. I love all of that empowerment, taking back your own narrative. And then she talks about going back to dance, just taking a class. And it's the same kind of sentiment as when she was talking about making a mistake. And she's like, I fear going into dance class because all eyes are going to be on me. And I don't want anyone to film me as I am rehearsing and I make a mistake and it be put online and the world judge me. That's really sad to think about. She did not feel comfortable dancing, and I would guess a lot of them feel that way because they're under such a microscope that if you make one mistake, the world is going to judge them just like Abby used to, which I hate. Another really interesting point was she said, she had lived a somewhat sheltered life because of the show and how busy I was with dance. I always think it's weird that our girls, they had these incredibly amazing, profound, huge life experiences, but they were sheltered because they were with their moms when they were doing it. They didn't really get to be junior high or high school girls until they were maybe in college because they were always with their mothers. Reading about all of her success after Dance Moms, when she was on Bold and Beautiful, I love that. It's just so nice to see other people in the world, in the entertainment industry specifically, lifting her up. I love Nia going to college. We love that. Love the UCLA girl. I think I offered to go to a fraternity party. She never took me up on that. It's fine. It's fine. And then obviously all of her advocacy work with elections and politics, which I personally very much support. I love when she finishes up talking about just her relationship with her mom and how wonderful it is, the things that Holly has taught her. It really made me sad to read her last interaction that she had with Abby, that text message that was sent. I think the biggest thing, it breaks my heart for her because I think the biggest thing is really, truly, Nia's very vulnerable about that. I think somewhere deep down, she still wanted her acceptance and she didn't get it. And she's like, you know what? That's it. I'm done. I'm going to move on. And she did it in the healthiest, most positive way possible. So all of the congratulations in the world. Thank you for being brave and sharing your story. I, as a pseudo extra mom in some way, shape, or form, or maybe just a crazy aunt on the bus, I don't know. I couldn't be prouder. All right. I'll see you guys back here next week. Bye.